A lonely guy was extremely lucky when the immortality system struck him like lightning. The system immediately wrapped around him like chains and informed him that he had received the immortality system. He still kept groping his body and face. He couldn't figure out if he was reborn or if it was something else. Eventually, the guy came to the conclusion that he had teleported. All he remembered was that a fat cat appeared in front of his eyes. When the cat fell on the guy's head, it seemed to have broken his cervical vertebrae and thus killed him. A funny yet frightening death at the same time. Pulled out of his depressing thoughts, a system appeared in front of the guy. The death rating was 0. Skill points awarded 1. Skill points remaining 1. Other awards. Increased aura. However, the death rating threw the guy into a stupor, as he didn't understand what it was. Xiao Mu looked at the system window and became furious. He didn't realize where he'd gotten to. Would he now have to die every time to pump the system? In a rage, hitting the wall, which all crumbled, the guy complains that only the power increased after death, and therefore not very profitable to die. Noticing the hole his fist left, the guy abruptly changed his mood from anger to grace and joy. Now he was cool, and the system was very useful. This made the joyful guy look at the system window again. There were also skills there after all. Looking at the system window for a long time, he even cried and began to complain about the hard life. Because it seems that this system has no manual for simple beginners. He would also have to die alone. Suddenly he heard a noise, like some passerby complaining about a guy lying down. The passerby didn't understand why the guy was lying on the road. At this moment, the reborn ragamuffin realized that his body was still lying on the road. Looking around carefully, he ran over to his body. Rummaging through his pockets, the guy found gold coins. It seems that he copies his stuff after resurrection, as he had the same amount of coins in his new body. He even gets the super genius idea of using the system to accumulate as much money as possible. But after looking at his body, he begins to complain that dying is actually very painful. However, he has no way out and needs to somehow use the system he received in order to improve his life. He even reassures himself with the thought that he has already died once, so he has nothing to fear anymore. The first thing he decides to do is to accelerate as hard as possible and smash his head into the wall. The passers-by are in incredible shock. They have never seen such a thing before, and the guy's skull cracked as he had hoped. The next time, he decided to scare other people, when the nobleman demonstrated excellent bow skills and tried to hit an apple. Instead, the guy probably earned himself a mental breakdown as he hit the protagonist in the heart. The next plan meant that he would have to spend money, and after all, he wanted to earn it. He succumbed to one of the deadly sins, gluttony. After all these attempts, the system gave him a death rating of F. Skill points remaining was equal to 1, and the rewards were all the same. He had to go through such humiliations and invitations, but the system gave him nothing, and his death rating became F. Suddenly, the system window showed some truly frightening news for the guy. There are limits to resurrections, and it's exactly 5 per week, and the guy only has 1 resurrection left. He is saddened to read this, because it turns out that if he accidentally dies after the number of resurrections is over, he will not be able to resurrect again. In his past life, he had a hard time, so not finding any other way out of his life, he jumped into the water. He had died in his past life, and now he had a system. He must not let himself perish again. Smashing the ground beneath him with his fist, he makes the decision that he can't just die, even if he improves his skills in the process. Taking a determined course, he decides to find another way to pump up the levels of the system. After all, he needs to establish himself in this world that is new to him. Thinking about his life and walking around the city, he witnessed a debtor refusing to return the money. The guy asked to return the debt, because they agreed that the man would return the money today, as the guy's mother needs the money and he can't do that to her. The debtor, however, refuses to return the money. He even offers the poor guy to kill him, but he will not give anything. The protagonist, on the other hand, in this moment he has grasped a benefit for himself. When the borrower leaves after beating up the person to whom he owes the money, he appears, a knight in shining armor, but still in tattered clothes. The protagonist asks the guy if he wants the protagonist to help him repay his debt. The sunlight itself seemed to illuminate his countenance and godlike appearance, yet the battered fellow did not realize who was before him at all. Not the least bit embarrassed, the protagonist told the poor guy that he specialized in helping people recover debts. After a while, the protagonist finds the man and demands money from him. The man is furious. He is not going to give anything. He offers the protagonist to even kill him, but he will give nothing. However, the tone of the cocky man changes dramatically when the protagonist draws his sword. The man, swathed in cold sweat, doesn't realize what's going on, and whether the guy right in front of him is really plotting to kill him. The protagonist reassures the man, for this is not what he came for. The man even breathed a sigh of relief, but that wasn't the end of it, for he informs him that his ghost will take care of the case. The protagonist will use his sword against himself. The man is shocked. Did the guy decide to just die like that? Death rating increased to D. Skill points awarded 2. Skill points remaining 3. Weekly resurrection 0 out of 5. The protagonist was very happy that the rating had increased. However, all attempts at resurrection were spent. A week later, in the house of the man in front of whom the poor man had died, suddenly there was a chill. A frightening shadow hovered over the man's bed, from which he shook with fear. When he opened his eyes, he saw before him the same guy who had died a week ago. The protagonist had come to demand money from the man. The man turned white with fear and begged for help. And a moment later, the protagonist was already standing on the street and contentedly holding the very money in his hands. Meanwhile, the man was calling his mother for help. A week later, the woman offered the man a drink of medicine. However, when the man was about to drink it, suddenly the bowl in front of him seemed to vaporize. In fact, it did not vaporize, but the protagonist snatched it up and drank the contents in a volley to the surprised faces of those present. After this medicine, the protagonist's mouth bled, and then he fell to the floor and his life was over. The still recently sickly man jumped out of bed and chased after the fleeing woman who wanted to poison him. The lady begged for mercy, for the great official of the southern gate had personally given her this order. An hour later, the man and the protagonist met in some alley. The man even cried, for he never thought the protagonist would be so selfless. So he asks that the protagonist not refuse the reward. Faking his role, the protagonist notes that everything is fine and he will accept the reward from him, since the man insists. A whole 3 months have passed in this manner. Now he sat peacefully and sipped his tea. He had died to others and beaten off debts, and that was how he had risen to prominence. His skills had made him famous throughout the city. As long as he had to die in the place of others, his grade continued to rise. After so many sacrifices he had to make, his body has become noticeably stronger. He can now extend his arms up to 500 meters, far surpassing normal humans in abilities. He even runs at a speed of 10 meters per second. However, there is one problem. The rating doesn't rise above D. If he wanted to raise the rankings, he would need to organize something massive. As far as his knowledge of this world and understanding was concerned, this world, a world where immortals and martial arts coexist, there are many robbers and villains in the world. Such people need to be dealt with in a special way, but their physical skills are still low, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to deal with them. However, the system, unfortunately for him, can't make him younger. Therefore, he won't stop growing. And when he dies, the system will also die. He will only be able to watch the fun and continue playing even as an old man. Since there is such a flaw, he needs to master cultivation. Only then will he be able to find a way out. Suddenly, he was brought out of his musings by a request. Someone came and inquired if a debt collector known in the area was here. This guest turned out to be an incredibly beautiful girl who had a blindfold over her eyes and came with her request. The guy immediately admits that the girl has come to the right place and he is the famous Chow Mu. He notices how beautiful the girl is, and yet she is blind, and that this is a standard story for stories of a certain genre. The girl reveals that the entire Chow family was wiped out. The Wujihui clan is responsible, it happened 6 months ago, and that she is the only survivor of the massacre. She has come to ask for a debt of blood. She would like Chow Mu to help her get revenge. In exchange, she offers the guy just what he was looking for. She offers to train him in the immortality punch, which is famous in the Chow family. When the girl looms over him, he asks a stupid question. Chow Mu asks the girl what her last name is, and whether she happens to be Ning. A while later, the market is quite noisy, and Chow Mu is looking for the owner of one of the stores. After finding the right owner, he complains that how can the owner of this particular outlet even sell groceries? Chow Mu even asks that the man cut up a watermelon for him, as he wants to take a look at it. The owner is furious and looks at Chow Mu threateningly, trying to understand why he came to him. Chow Mu has only come to make a scene. However, the owner was not pleased with Chow Mu's actions and decided to slaughter him. Chow Mu was just waiting for this, then notices that the man is indeed a martial arts master. He also accuses the man of being known as Butcher Zhen, and that he killed the entire Chow family. So Chow Mu comes to take revenge on the butcher. However, Butcher Zhen easily knocks the guy out. He only managed to send a heart sign with his fingers. Everyone in the neighborhood is shocked, and in the meantime, a fountain of blood formed from Chow Mu's head. That's how Chow Mu's life ended. Meanwhile, the other townspeople called Butcher Zhen a murderer and wanted to catch him. But Butcher Zhen is not a simple man. So taking a knife with his teeth and then getting on a makeshift transportation, he fled from the city. Hiding in the shadows of the building, Chow Mu has already managed to resurrect. He complains that he was in incredible pain from that blow. Approaching his body while everyone else is in anger or panic, he takes the gold he had. This time he demands a bigger reward from the system than usual. Death rating increased to C. Skill points awarded, 10. Skill points remaining, 20. 4 more attempts at weekly resurrection. Skill increase cost, 5. The immortality punch was at the introduction level that he had already passed. Chow Mu was so excited that he had finally obtained a C rating. However, after looking at the system again, he was perplexed. Would skill points really be deducted? He now wasn't sure if it was the right decision to activate the system at all. And it turns out that he could improve his skills by spending points. 5 points could be exchanged for mastering the immortality punch. If that was the case, where would the remaining 20 points be used? He decided to demand the system to grant him the immortality punch skill. What was the guy's surprise when the system informed him that the host's death score did not meet the standard. So the selection function has not yet been unlocked for him, and until then the system will allocate points randomly. He was too surprised by this turn of events after all. Did he have to find more sophisticated methods to part with his life or what? However, he decided to leave it for now, as he still had Butcher Zhen in mind. Chow Mu couldn't leave this butcher so easily, and he wanted to fight him a few more times. Somewhere on the outskirts of the city, abandoning his transportation, the butcher immediately ran into a house. There he immediately started writing a report to his master, how he didn't hold back and killed the guy who claimed that Butcher Zhen had slaughtered the entire Chow family. But the butcher remembered that the Chow family had been completely exterminated, so he didn't know how the impudent guy could know that. Attaching his report to the bird's foot, the butcher even suggested that maybe someone had managed to survive that night. And certainly if so, he should get rid of anyone who knew of the incident. However, for too long he pondered about it, and a guest had already rushed to his house. The guest called himself Chiao Qing and said that the butcher had killed his brother Chiao Mu. So he demanded that the butcher pay for this sin with his blood. The guy rushed at the butcher with a cry for his family's heritage. The butcher immediately waved his knife in his direction. The knife seemed to cut the sausage exactly in the middle. Chiao Mu notices that the point of the knife is in his hand, and then what will the butcher do next? The butcher is surprised by such a question, as if the guy doesn't know what the butcher is going to do. The guy is already almost crying in pain, but he certainly wasn't going to give up. So he asks the very obvious question of whether the butcher is going to kill him. Even Butcher Zhen, who had seen a lot of people and situations in his life, thought the guy was mentally ill. He tried to pull the point out of the guy's hand, but Chow Mu took advantage of this moment and hit the butcher in the face. After flying some distance away but not falling, the butcher notices that the guy is different from his brother and that he is much more powerful than his brother. However, the man decides that next time he will not make such blunders again. 5 minutes later, the butcher still manages to knock the guy out. That's how Chao Qing died. Butcher Zhen notices that the guy managed to get revenge on his brother, but he was definitely in over his head. Butcher Zhen even breathed a sigh of relief, called the bird, and decided that the situation had changed, and therefore it was not worth sending a report to the Lord for the time being. At the same moment, Butcher Zhen was able to dodge the piece of window flying at him on instinct alone. Another brother had appeared who was not going to forgive him and wanted to avenge his brother's death. Seeing the flying guy with a glowing aura, even the bird was frightened. Butcher Zhen was also already scared as well, but he tried not to show it and was about to let another one of his brothers die. The bird still managed to fly away, and Butcher and another brother from the Chow family were drawn into a terrifying battle where lives were at stake. Butcher Zhen emerged victorious from this hard fight. He was exhausted, he wasn't so young anymore, and it was hard to compete with the youth. He had already defeated 3 people and 1 more in the city. He was already exhausted and hoped that he had finally finished off all the brothers. Chow Mu was hiding behind a statue at this time. After the first death, he had 5 points taken off. The second time, 2 points were taken off, and his skill level increased by 20%. The last 2 times, only 1 point each was taken off, and the skill increased to 40%. But the rating was lowered and became D again. This leads Qiao Mu to conclude that it seems that the higher the mastery level, the more points will be deducted. The lower the rating, the fewer points would be randomly assigned, so there were quite a few restrictions and nuances, and he couldn't fight one opponent forever. He only had 1 weekly resurrection left. He was even considering going back in a week. Glancing at his enemy once again, he thought that it was better to end things now. After all, for now Butcher Zhen is weak after the attack of the last spears, so it is definitely not worth giving up. Xiaomo uses recovery, uses experience points, uses exaltation. In the fourth fight, relying only on 20% fist skill, he is almost equal to Butcher Zhen. He may not be able to fight like this again, but he decides it's worth a try. After looking at his prey, he decides to finish the task early and then start a new one. Butcher Zhen was still pondering over what had happened. These guys seemed too similar to him, yet each one was stronger than the previous one. It was as if the strength of each newcomer was growing, and the skills were becoming more powerful. The strength of the last one was almost the same as Butcher Zhen. He was even afraid that the next one would definitely be able to overpower him. While the butcher waited, no one ever showed up, so he rejoiced that it was finally over. At the same moment, all of the butcher's hopes and appeasement were wiped away as the guy appeared in front of him once again, and this time the butcher could only watch helplessly as Qiao Mu attacked him. For this one strike, the butcher was defeated. He never managed to survive the encounter with the fifth brother. Qiao Mu collected bags of money from his alleged brothers. He also found a secret letter, in which was the confirmation of the information that Butcher Zhen was the one who destroyed the Qiao family. The first time Qiao Mu was killed by Butcher's knife, then Qiao Mu's rating became C. He wonders if the death rating will be related to the identity of the person who defeated him, and will the death rating at the hands of the villain be high? He decides that he needs to find all these questions and speculations, some confirmation. He still can't understand the rest of what was written, so he decides to show it to the girl and find out from her. After a long interval, he arrived at the alley of Yangcheng City. He had finally returned. The girl immediately opened up to him and wondered where he had been all this time. However, at the same instant, she turned back and noticed that the voice was different from Qiao Mu and that he was not Qiao Mu. The guy had roughly expected this from a blind girl who had lived alone for over half a year. He even contemplates the fact that his muscles have gotten even stronger in that time. Qiao Mu asks the girl to believe him and that his voice has just changed. The girl asks for some proof. He gives the same nonsense about the surname Ning. The girl remembers Qiao Mu asking her that stupid question for a month. The girl immediately hugged him, which even the guy was shocked by. Qiao Mu was so happy with the girl's gesture and even esteemed it as true happiness. In the end, she agreed that it was Qiao Mu in front of her. After the Qiao family disappeared, her eyes started to move, which is a sign that the eyes of the heavens are about to open. In addition, she is very perceptive, so she asks Qiao Mu not to lie to her. But the guy already knows everything about her. She is the only one left in the Qiao family, but the enemy will not kill her because she is born with spiritual consciousness and is endowed with special talents. Qiao Mu can't wait to learn more techniques. The girl, however, advises him if he wants to perfect it, all he needs to do is to warm up his blood and energy, a process that can take several years. Qiao Mu refuses to work for nothing and demands the fulfillment of the original contract, especially since he's already almost peaked and he could feel it. The girl notices that Qiao Mu is an assertive guy, so he takes him by the hand and decides to see if he has enough strength. I wonder if he will be strong enough for everything she can give him. When the girl touched Qiao Mu, she was struck by lightning for a moment. She abruptly withdrew her hand and blushed all red, and immediately wondered what exactly she had just touched. Somehow the boy was strangely disappointed at the girl's thoughts. The girl's face was all red. They haven't known each other for that long, so she doesn't know if it's normal for them to cultivate together. Once again touching Qiao Mu's hand, the girl thinks that he is incredible. Training strength takes a very long time, and Qiao Mu has already done it. Since she thinks the guy is making great progress, then he asks the girl to teach him something new. Immortality Punch is a unique technique of the Qiao family. If Qiao Mu perfects this technique, he will be able to live much longer. His path will not be easy, but he needs to keep striving for immortality, otherwise the system will be useless in the future. And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you would like to see a sequel, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your wishes in the comments. You can also subscribe to Telegram to know about new videos. Bye everybody.